This is the Corner Cutter Podcast, episode 37. Hey guys, welcome to the Corner Cutter Podcast. I'm your host, Josh. And this is the podcast all about cubing and how to improve. You can visit the podcast website, thecornercutterpodcast.com, for show notes. And there is lots of other great information and resources on there as well. Today I have a few updates and also some shoutouts. But let's start off by jumping into cubing news. Cubing news, records, releases, and ratings. Quite a few big records this week. To start off, the 3x3 world record single was broken by Feliks. He got a 4.22 single. It broke the last record by 0.37 seconds, which is a huge jump in the 3x3 world. And in that average, he did have another sub-5 single, but he had 2 6s and I think a 7, so he wasn't able to get a good average with that counting 4. And the 4.22 single had a PLO skip in it. Next, the 4x4 average was broken by MacLeod, 22.26. Previous record was 22.27 by Sebastian Weir. So he just took that one away. Good for him. MacLeod also got the 6x6 single 119.46. One other interesting note is Feliks doesn't have any unofficial world records anymore. But my guess is he's going to keep up there with the other guys. 3x3 FMC mean was broken, 24 even. He had a 22, a 24, and a 26. And also the square one average was broken. It is now 7.25. And the same guy has both single and average now. Sebastian Weir got a 5x5 European record for the average, 48.26. Let's move on to some releases. The Qi 1x3x3 fidget spinner, or I guess just spinner, was released from Qi. It looks pretty interesting and fun to play with. Also, the MJS carbon fiber Fisher mirror cube, wow, that's a mouthful, was released. The Z Cloud Pyramix. And that's currently $5.99 on the Cubicle. I told you guys last week that we're seeing a lot of budget cubes come out. The Cubicle also released their Angstrom Wuxue M. That is about $70. Oh, and one other note. Feliks got the world record single on the Angstrom GAN Air SM. The Yushin 9x9, although it was released in 2016, the black stickered version just came out. Let's see what else we have. The Shengshao Tank 3x3, 4x4, and 5x5 are all on there, and they're $4, $6, and $8. It would be interesting to see how those perform. A few other weirder cubes, I guess you could call them, from Z-Cube, MF8, or Cube Style, also on here. And then finally, the GAN 460, which is a 4x4, is on pre-order. And that is currently $56. Also, now the Cubicle has the Cube With Us mat to go along with the shirt. And that wraps up the releases. Now for ratings. I do not have a cube to rate or review this week. I haven't bought many cubes recently. So what I want to do is hear from you guys. I now have a sort of call-in line, I guess you could say, where you can go and record a message for the podcast, and if it's good, I will play it on one of the next episodes. So all you have to do is go over to speakpipe.com/ The Corner Cutter Podcast, or probably the easier way would be to go to thecornercutterpodcast.com and go to the feedback section, and I will have the link there. So I want to hear a review of the latest cube you've gotten. If it's one of the cubes I listed in the new releases, that's even better, but it doesn't have to be. Just a new cube would be the best. Once again, you can go to thecornercutterpodcast.com and click on the feedback page. Why don't now we jump into some shoutouts? I'm very happy to say this week I do have quite a few. First email is in from Jack. He said, "Thanks for the weekly podcast. I'm a new listener and I love learning about tips and records. Thank you. In the last episode, I heard you talk about new WCA events, and I have a very strong opinion about new events, and I think they should add more events such as 4x4 with feet or Kilo Minks." I really want to say Kibby Minks. Also, I firmly believe that color neutrality is something that all cubers should learn. And this is in regards to what I asked about, I think it was 1 or 2 weeks ago, to have a cubing debate show. And those were the two things I wanted cubers to debate. Also, Aiden messaged me and said he would like to come on as well to debate this. And it works out perfectly because he is almost on completely opposite sides with Jack. So we are working on putting an episode together that features the debate, and that will be coming up maybe next week. We'll see. Also, Jack sent me another message. He said, "I recently listened to some of the older episodes, and do you ever plan on doing another best and budget cubes episode? If you do, I think you should include more events like clock, 6x6, 7x7, OH, and feet." Jack, that does sound like a good idea. I did do it, I think it was around this time last year, so it's definitely time for an update. Lots of new cubes have come out. So I will be working on that for one of the next episodes. Then he said, also, do you plan on doing more episodes like Pyramix 360, but with different events? So I think it's crossed my mind, but that actually is a good idea. I really should do that, and it's a good way to teach on the podcast, because this is the podcast all about cubing and how to improve, and I definitely like focusing on the improve part. Back to his email. Thirdly, what square ones and scubes do you recommend? Okay, let's start off with scubes. I only recommend, if money is not an option, the X-Man Wingy Scube. You can get it for about $10 when it's on sale or from China, and it's definitely worth it. Otherwise, the Moyu Magnetic, But if you're really on a budget, then the Tubing Classroom Scube or the budget Chi one, I really don't recommend those, though. So the Wingy Scube, 4 Scube, and Square One, it's a mix-up between the X-Man Volt and the Chi Square One. The X-Man Volt is a lot faster, but it does not have as good corner cutting. But that one is currently my main. The Chi one is smooth, but it's slow. So it's really a mix-up on what you like. I currently use the Volt MS as well, so I do like that better. And MS means magnetic slice. Let's move on to some other feedback. I got another review in iTunes, and it's a 5-star review. He said, "Best cubing podcast." It was in all caps, so I yelled it. And this one's by the Soccer Turtle Cuber from the USA. He said, "This is a great podcast and is very enjoyable to listen to. The host, Josh, is a very good interviewer." Thanks. He is very consistent and offers great cubing tips. He gives updates on world records, new releases, as well as reviews. I recommend him to a lot of my cubing friends. I have a cubing club that I started at my school. I definitely recommend that you start listening, and you will not regret it. those were some kind words. Thank you. I do appreciate you taking the time to leave that review. And that's cool you started a cubing club. That's great. You're spreading the word about cubing. He also left a comment on one of my YouTube videos. I was asking for tips on 5x5, and he did give me what I wanted. So thank you. And you should go check out his channel as well, which is Soccer Turtle Cuber. And speaking of YouTube, I noticed I've been getting a lot more comments on my YouTube videos recently. So thank you guys. The most recent things I've posted are some competition videos, like I posted my Pyramix average and my 3x3 single, which is 11.40. Why not some personal stuff now? Finally, after about 3 or 4 weeks of not doing my Pyramix race on the speed solving forums, I do take care of that. I got a little behind. I kept posting results a little bit late, and I hadn't got a chance to do my solves for quite a few weeks. So finally I got caught back up on that, and results for the most recent week are posted, and all my solves are in, so I'm happy about that. Feels good to be caught up. Also, I'm going to make it a point now to complete most of the events I can do in the weekly competition on the forums. I kind of slacked off of that during the past few months. I was really into it last year, though, and it kept me up to date on all the cubes. I was hearing DG Cubes on the Dilsoni podcast. He said it really keeps him warmed up, I guess, in all the events. So that was a great tip, and I'll let you guys know how that goes. That's about it for this week's episode. Just a few quick updates. I want you guys to send in your non-Cuber stories. So it could be times you're out in public, at a restaurant, maybe just in a store somewhere. When you're cubing, like I had a few stories last week from the orthodontist, and I think I shared one about telling somebody about a competition. So I want to hear those stories. Send them in, feedback at thecornercutterpodcast.com, or you could also use the new call-in line, I guess call-in in quotes. Just go to the cornercutterpodcast.com/feedback. Also, if you have any comments, tips, or questions for the podcast, you can send them in on that call-in line as well. Thank you guys so much for listening. You're awesome. It's time to take this episode back to the scrambling table and come back next week for episode 38 of the Corner Cutter Podcast. I was thinking of episode 1 of the podcast when I was doing this cubing news. Take a listen. Starting off, the 3x3 world record single was broken by Feliks. I'll have a story about that sometime.